Greetings from Silicon Valley and welcome to our Thrive Innovation Series. I'm John Hartnett, CEO and founder of SVG Ventures and Thrive. And I'm delighted to be joined here today by Steve Kaniewski, President and CEO of Valmont Industries, and Daniel Koppel, co-founder and CEO of Prospera Technologies. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Really looking forward to a fascinating discussion on your partnership. And we've obviously been along the journey with you over the last few years. So really looking forward to what the future holds for artificial intelligence in agriculture. With Thrive, we have a vision to advance the future of food and agriculture through innovation. We've been ranked #1 most active ag tech investor by Crunchbase and leading agri-food accelerator supported by global entrepreneurs by AgFunder. We work with over 40 corporations on open innovation, and we have over 5,000 global founders in our private network in over 100 countries. On the next slide, we are currently open our 8th Thrive Global Accelerator. We're accepting applications where we are looking for the best ag tech and food tech startups. In addition to investment, we provide expertise to scale your company, access to our global ecosystem of major corporations, farmers, and investors, and our famous demo day at the Forbes Thrive Summit. The deadline is November 5th. On our next slide, we recently expanded our platform into Canada and established our HQ in Calgary. And we're thrilled to launch an inaugural Thrive Canada Accelerator with our partners there. And we're currently taking applications, and deadline is November 5th as well. On our next slide, we launched our Thrive Global Initiative last year, focused on addressing the key sustainability goals identified by the UN SDGs. And we did this in partnership with USDA, the US State Department, and key partners around the world. We have now held specific challenges in Australia, Canada, Africa, Europe, and we're currently running our LATAM challenge, as you can see in the next slide. And you can join to see that on December 2nd. On the next slide, you can see the LATAM challenge, and maybe next slide again, Jess. I would like to thank our corporate partners. These are some of the biggest names in the food and agriculture industry, and we're delighted to be working with them to accelerate their innovation and growth strategy. And you can learn more about this if you're interested to become a partner. On our next slide, we have focused our webinar series here today on the future supply chain, as well as addressing some of the key challenges of feeding a growing population in a sustainable way and dealing with climate change and the impact of the global pandemic. And we're discussing key trends, technologies, and solutions in the agri-food industry with top CEOs, innovators, and entrepreneurs and investors. On our next slide, we have done a series of other events or challenges, and we will be running a webinar next month on November 17th, putting a spotlight on ag tech innovation in Israel in partnership with Growing IL. So I hope you can join us for that. On our next slide, we have quite a large audience joining us today from around the world. I believe there's almost 500 people registered for today, 54% from international, 46% from the US, I think representing about 58 countries and 41 states. So welcome everybody, really delighted to have you here. We will now launch a poll. If you can look at the questions and maybe answer them now. If you could take a look at this, and the question really is around, what do you think the most important outcome will be for advancing ag tech in open fields? On our next slide, you will see we will also have open Q&A with Steve and Daniel. So please submit your questions now. And if you like someone else's question, please upvote so we get the best questions for the two guys here. So on our next slide, I'm really excited, as I mentioned, about this panel. We've been very close to Valmont and Prospera over the past 3 years and seen how this relationship has blossomed. And earlier in May, Valmont announced to acquire Prospera Technologies, global leader in agriculture, artificial intelligence, and machine learning for a major sum of 300 million. So this is one of the biggest deals of ag tech world, this year. So maybe if I start with Steve, if you'd like to give us an overview of Valmont Industries and maybe share a little bit more with our audience this morning.
Sure. First off, good morning and good day to everyone. And just to give you a little background on Valmont Industries, we're a 75-year-old diversified industrial company based in Omaha, Nebraska. We're roughly about 83 locations around the world and about 11,000 employees. We're traded on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker VMI. And our founding of our company by Robert B. Doherty was done in a shed, 75 years ago. And it was based on this premise of agricultural productivity and taking what was really a fledgling kind of technology called the center pivot irrigation machine and really commercializing that and expanding it across the globe. And as you see today, no matter where you go around the world, there are center pivots. They're used for a variety of different crops, for cotton, for sugarcane, so whether that's going into food production directly or into other feedstocks and or even ethanol type of production around the world. From that, we grew into a utility and lighting business. We took tube that we were making for the center pivot, basically stood it up and bent it a little bit. And then that has grown into a quite vibrant business for us as well, close to $1 billion. Our irrigation business is close to $1 billion. And then we have, this traffic and lighting telecom component, which if you think of 5G rollouts, we're involved with every aspect of that, from the poles to the antenna mounts to the cable harnesses, bolts, etc. So one of the things we did when I took over in 2018 is do a review of, okay, what is it that we want to do in the tech world? We started really along the line of disruption. We asked ourselves, how could we disrupt instead of being disrupted? We knew we were sitting ducks if we just sat back and just let the market kind of go the way it was going. Innovation around the center pivot machine was mostly around making the machine itself better and not looking at it as a more vibrant way to increase farm productivity. So starting there, we said, well, we have beachfront property, and that beachfront property we're on 250,000 different fields, each field around 120 acres underneath of it. And so we're in a very unique position of being on the field all the time, every day, 365 days of the year. And that was the key for us is, like anybody who owns maybe beachfront property, you often develop it in different ways. You look at maybe a condo unit, house, shopping, those kinds of things. And so we said we were going to do just that. We weren't going to act alone in the space. And we wanted to work with people and companies that really shared this vision of, hey, the pivot is in the most unique place to capture data on a growing field. There was all these sensors that were in ground that either take a lot of maintenance or a lot of cost. A pivot has connectivity. We have over 125,000 of them connected to date, and or it was in the position to really sense and analyze the field straight from planting through harvest. And that made it unique just from a data capture source. And then we know that the pivot with power and being on the field could also do remediation. And so our goal has been to look at how can we use the pivot as a data capture source and then move it to actually remediating what it finds from an agronomic perspective. But we didn't stop there. We did say that our channel is also the most unique thing that we have, which is over 500 plus dealers around the world. So we have a brand that's been around for 75 years that growers trust, and they trust us in the sense of, if you're not there tomorrow, my crop will burn up. If you're not there tomorrow, I'm going to have major damage to the crop. And so that was the vision. We wanted to look beyond and say, how can we even go into the open field? Something that center pivot manufacturers had never done. And around 3 years ago, as you alluded to, John, Daniel and I met up after our teams met at some conferences, and we met in Tel Aviv, and we talked about what the future could bring. And we decided to enter into a partnership at that point. And we worked with the Prospera group to really commercialize and work on new technologies around data capture, agronomy, and obviously now in the remediation space. And so that has been what has moved us forward. After about 2.5 years, it made sense for us to do 1 + 1 = 3. We thought we could accelerate as opposed to being a partner, that we could be together and really work this through. We had been spending incrementally millions of dollars more on technology. It was something we told the street we were going to do, even though at the time the farm economy was dropping roughly 10% per year. But we knew that this was our lifeblood and this was our future, and we wanted to get into the space long before anybody else could come along. And I think the partnership has worked as planned, and we're really creating some innovation around even just data capture, right? Daniel, I won't steal all his thunder, but we can take any image, if it's a satellite, if it's a plane, a drone. Obviously, the pivot being as close to the plant as it is, and the repetitive nature of it, we have a technology we can get around an entire 120 acres now in less than 2 hours. And so that ability to take that kind of resolution, as well as the repetitive nature of the data capture, really creates the strongest algorithms. And so that's kind of where we've come to through our evolution. And then in May this year, we completed the deal.
That's fantastic. I mean, an incredible story. I mean, obviously, we've been very much aware of the long history with Valmont over 75 years, and we obviously, see you in the fields, in the streets, and everywhere around the world. But this is an incredible and exciting journey to take this forward for the next 75 years. So, really, really great background there, Steve. So Daniel, so you're sitting in Tel Aviv, and along comes Steve. Maybe if you can tell us a little bit about Prospera and what you've been doing and what you've built over the last number of years.
Sure, yeah, thanks. I'll start first of all with a big thank you for having us here. And then also, as you mentioned, John, we've been in a relationship for a couple of years now, or a few years now. I think the day after I relocated to Silicon Valley, I think that the next day I was already at like the first Thrive event. It's a great place to network, and so I try to call that out every time I get a chance. So thanks, and you're building a great platform.
Great, thank you.
So yeah, we started in 2014. We saw the major gap between sort of the tech world and the ag world, and we knew we want to always focus around machine learning and data science. And at the time, looking at our first application, we really wanted to deploy a computer vision application in greenhouses. And the reason was just the complexity of agriculture and growing ag was so immense. And we knew it makes sense to start where we can measure things and treat it more as a lab. So for us, a greenhouse was sort of like this mega lab versus other environments in the agriculture world. And so we set up to deploy cameras in greenhouses and apply computer vision applications as our first test to see if that would provide value and potentially have a big business. We started in Spain. We got traction there. As we built out the technologies, we started going beyond just computer vision and looking at other sources of data. We expanded to Mexico and started working with some of the largest produce growers in the world. And then we started, after we were able to sort of see we're in the right direction and building the team, gaining capital, and probably more importantly, generating revenues that we believed in. We decided to expand beyond the greenhouse world and started experimenting in pivots, in other open field applications, always focusing more on the machine learning applications. And in fact, I think one of the biggest changes as a company was not a tech perspective. It was our go-to-market and I would say business strategy in general, where we realized it's going to be very difficult both to focus on building these type of deep technologies, but also building a brand and a go-to-market, a direct go-to-market channel. And that's when we started thinking more of like a sort of an OEM style business, where we have built for years these data capabilities, and we were thinking about, let's take our machine learning algorithms and through different channels take them to market, not necessarily with our brand in front, but let's monetize these computer vision and machine learning applications. And so with that in mind, we started working with dealers. We even worked with some of the largest greenhouse manufacturers. And that's when we also started working with Valmont, Valley specifically. And I should say, we always thought of this as a very broad play. And even with working with Valley, that's the Valley and Valmont, I should say. Valley is the irrigation brand of Valmont. So in the ag space, Valley is more well known globally, maybe Valmont. But that's when we started working with Valley, and as Steve mentioned, taking this approach of applying our technologies to mainly pivot enabled fields. And I think most important part, I think, out of all this, we didn't think as a company, and I know, John, you want to ask more questions around this, so I'll briefly mention, we didn't think of a company this would go to an M&A. In fact, as a company, we were approached several times throughout the years of the company with, Steve is smiling because he knows some of the stories, where we were approached. Even I can share here that even in the first year of the company, one of the well-known companies just wanted to ask about M&A. And we still have this vision of IPO. And I think even it's very interesting today because there's so many companies trying to achieve that. And I really believe there's a world where an ag tech company will IPO. Having said that, Steve came along and sort of surprised us a little bit, focusing mostly on culture, on the people, on the independence of the company, and also building a vision that is on the one hand disruptive to the pivot world, or transformative to the pivot world, but also the potential to go beyond. And that's, I think, where really it was a short process, right? I think we were very close as partners, and a really short process where we decided where this can make sense for us to join the Valmont family. We decided to be part of Valmont, and in fact, since May, we are, and we're so far extremely happy and excited about it.
That's excellent. Great background, there. And it's interesting, you were very much not fixated, but focused on an IPO and going your own path. So it's incredible to see how this all kind of came together. I mean, Steve, obviously there was a purpose and vision around this, and you had been working for a couple of years before this. Can you maybe share that with us in terms of what's the purpose and vision for the partnership now?
Well, as we've now gone through the M&A, it's really to create a separate business for us. It'll utilize some of what we have in place with the Valley brand and the dealerships, but we really want to go into full-blown agronomy. We believe, and always have believed, that the productivity of the ground that we're on is of vital importance. When people talk about sustainability, they often focus on one element of it, and it may be water. So there's something that really conserves water well. There's something that really can identify pests well. There's something that can really harvest well or plant well. I think with what we're doing, we're looking at the entire package. Working with OEMs to help them with data in terms of their seed and how seed would work, how their machines, when they plant, what is the actual real-time data that comes out of the field based on maybe the row and how tight the row is. It could be, instead of putting down pesticide on an entire field, we can identify very distinct sections of it and only use that as a place to go after. I think ultimately the pivot will be one of the more unique ways with the Prospera technology to actually identify weed, pest, and then to remediate it. That could be mechanically, that could be lasers, that could be all kinds of things. But ultimately, it's to get more productivity off the field with less inputs. And what farmers really hate to hear is this will help increase your yield. And if you just leave it with that statement, they're jaded a little bit. And they'll say, yeah, but you're going to raise price and all these other things. And so any productivity I get, you're going to take back in price. But if you can help reduce inputs into that as well, you're helping, the sustainability angle, and you're helping the grower's pocket. And that, more than anything, is our vision. And there's nothing that's preset per se. We are adapting to a startup technology company that says, hey, we're going to try this. And if it doesn't work, we'll abandon it. And so that requires us to perform in other parts of our business to help compensate for that as a public company, and so that our shareholders can see that we're working on the future and still supporting the present. And I think that's what a lot of companies struggle with. Yeah. When I first went out, I was a new CEO, and I was going out saying, hey, we're going to spend X millions more in SG&A, even though the market's declining. There's people that doubt that. And you have to stay convinced. You have to have a board that you can bring along and support that endeavor. And obviously then to come along and say, we're going to do what was our second biggest acquisition ever for a company that is 100 people and not that much revenue as compared to the 3 billion we do otherwise. I think it's really to show the dedication to the belief that technology is going to impact all aspects of our business. And if we're not a part of it, then we will get passed by it. And I'm super excited about what we've been able to accomplish already. Some of the things that we're doing with growers and the testimonials, which they often don't want to give, that they are giving, and talking about real dollars and cents is really, encouraging. And then if you take now the fact that there's all this rapid inflation, the business case for us just becomes that much stronger. And, you can't just say we're going to knock down more land or trees to create more space. You can't say we're going to keep putting on more chemical. You can't say we're going to keep doing what big ag has done. We're going through a transformative time. And so this was the right time. And we're positioned well. Plants only grow so fast. So having a 3-year head start is very meaningful to us.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve. And obviously being able to provide those kind of insights and, effectively reducing the cost for the grower or the farmer is, they're business people in the end of the day that need to kind of drive their business forward. So this is an exciting, development. Daniel, obviously, maybe there's a lot of founders in our audience today, and you've gone through a really interesting journey. Could you tell us a little bit more about maybe how this came about and any advice that you would give to founders in our audience today?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, we were always bullish about building a big company, and I think the underlying to that is that we've sort of seen the light. We believe that some of these applications they should be on every single field in the world. And so we came like an all-in approach. To date, we still are doing everything we can to have these technologies on every single field in the world. And I think having the flexibility to find the way to get there is probably key. We thought we might go one way, then we went another. We thought we should start with space number one and build our own brand, and then we realized we should probably go with a channel. I think I think everyone, at least that is probably listening to this forum, knows the trivial things about ag. The speed, the seasonality. But I think founders need to think about that when they build a product market fit. This is not going to happen in a season because you'll just get feedback after one season. So when you start thinking about that, in other industries, it's all about focus and doing one thing. And while we're great believers in focus, and Steve knows, we've sort of eliminated like 50% of projects that I now have responsibility of. Like, so we're big believers in focus, but in ag it's a bit different because when you're going to get your signals at the end of the season, maybe you want to try out a few things. So my belief, at least, is that if you have your core technology that hopefully is differentiated and is not trivial, you need to try a few variants of productizing that technology because of the length it will take you to achieve product market fit. And that length needs, I think, even probably more importantly than product market fit, needs you to think about how you're going to finance the company. In other tech companies and SaaS, traditional or classical SaaS companies, you'll look at 6 months funding, 10 months. You need to think about 2-year funding. And people, I think, don't talk about that enough when you go to raise capital. And you need to think about your cap table and who you want sitting around your board and cap table, and for them to understand that you're not going to show growth rates on a weekly or monthly basis because this is a seasonal business. So I think the underlying facts that everybody knows around this being seasonal and, growers are only getting 20 or 30 chances, shots at this in life, and how difficult it is. I think all the complexities are well known today in the ag tech sort of scene and all the events we've seen in the last 5-10 years. I think how you build a company around that and how you think about product market fit, financing the company, and who you want in your environment, and how you sort of build a team that will be with you, even so things might take longer. I think those are key to build a successful company in this space.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, great advice there. I mean, obviously, everything that's said to a founder is to keep focused all the time, and I totally relate to what you're saying there. And time is a different equation in the ag world. Steve, obviously, go-to-market here, is going to be a key area of focus over the next few years. What's going to be different, in terms of your go-to-market strategy here? Are you going to have same brands, or tell us a little bit about what the plan is there?
No, I think that everything's on the table, and that is one of the cultural changes that we had to do as a bigger company, and say, are we willing to change the way we brand? Are we willing to change the way we go to market? We're used to selling products and items and things. And really, what I can say at this point, John, is we're committed to, it's going to be a recurring revenue model, and it's going to be a service model. And that's tough for manufacturers. It's tough for boards. It's tough for a lot of people. But we're committed to that, not just in this business, but also in our infrastructure businesses, this exact same way. We want to create a service that people will re-up. It shows value. With a product that has a long life cycle like Pivot, it's 30 years. And so we're used to then saying, okay, here's how we'll supply it with parts, and here's how we'll innovate. And we'll go through 2 years of trials on something. That's not going to be the case as we do this going forward. But we've had to talk to our channel, our traditional channel, so that they understand how they fit with our endeavors going forward. And I think where we've already been very successful is the channel that we utilize today for selling things is going to play a part in services. And really, that's the only way that you can support tech in the field on scale. You have to have a team of people that can go out, and again, at that moment's notice, and say, hey, this isn't working. I need someone here today. And I think, as I would talk to founders, if you're not thinking about that too, then scale really becomes a major problem. It becomes very expensive, and it can cause a lot of blowback that you're not expecting through having a great service otherwise. Right. And so those are the kinds of thoughts and discussions that we're having, and talking about how do we model that, how do we adjust to it. we took our entire technology stack that was within our Valley irrigation business, which was run by the long-term president of the unit, and said, we're taking this from you and giving it to Daniel and his team. And again, that's not easy, right? And the technology is the cool part sometimes. It's also the part that has paid, has great margin growth and those kinds of things, which we did see even prior to the acquisition. But we're trying to hit the accelerator. And in order to do that, you have to make really fundamental changes. They're hard within organizations. And you have to admit that you don't know everything. And the thing that we can do is say, here's how the channel now, which I think is very expensive for startup companies. That's why traditional companies can catch up oftentimes by throwing money at things. If you go back into Walmarts and Targets and others that were getting beat in Web 1.0, caught up in Web 2.0. And I think that's the same thing here. Not to say, there won't be something that comes out and IPOs through, but I think there is, if you really want to accelerate technology adoption, using those traditional channels are meaningful. They took 75 years to build, and they don't happen overnight, and especially as dispersed as growers are around the world and the different needs around the world.
Yeah. I mean, great advice and great, insight there. I think, many young technology companies, don't think about the after sales and the importance of that. And obviously you've got this history, you've got the relationships, which is so important in terms of the trust with the farmer, and having a product in the field for, 25, 30 years, you got to make sure it works all the time. But really great to hear that. Maybe our final question, and it's linked to our poll as well. I'll give you both a chance to give your predictions here. But in terms of the current trends, in ag tech, in open fields, where do you think they will lead to, or what will be do you think will be the biggest impact of some of the ag tech trends that are out there, today? Maybe Daniel, obviously you're steeped in this yourself. I'd love to get your thoughts there.
Sure, yeah. So if I only sort of narrow it down to sort of the digital ag, because there's lots of things going on all over the board, which I think are extremely interesting, and I think will change a lot of what the world we know today. First of all, I again, this is not new, but we're still at the infancy of the digital world and the digital era, just getting everything, to be digitized. So I think going forward, this is still a major milestone that we're going to achieve. And I think in parallel, the applications both on the machine learning side, so being able to change the way, I call it the science of growing, because there isn't really a science of growing today, right? And if you go to university, you wouldn't find the faculty of how to grow. It's more like around agronomy or about soil sciences, etc. So I think the establishment of the science of growing is going to change dramatically, and I think that's going to change, the growing as we know it, and the first layer of digitizing, the second layer of data science is going to change that. I also think robotics is going to be a big deal. This is, obviously robotics. I think the biggest question in robotics is not the tech capability; it's the capital that's needed. And so here, I don't think we're seeing mega capital investments there. I mean, Deere is doing probably the biggest job of everyone, but that means it's just moving a bit slower. But I think in coming years, the real game-changing applications from robotics will come. And those together, I think, have the effect on even like how we build genetics. So the more data you have, you can sort of build simulators, and with that, you can decrease the time it takes to bring new genetics to the world and solve problems that you have around what chemicals to use and what genetics solve what chemicals. So I just think we're still at this basis that the foundation of what will bring huge applications both to how we grow and how we build new genetics.
Yeah, excellent. We're in the first mile of the marathon here. Maybe we could put up the poll question, and we can take a look at that. And maybe Steve, when you look at that, the question was, what do you think will be the most important outcome from advancing ag tech into open fields? Looks like 47% of the audience are talking about sustainable processes, which is, great to see. And then obviously followed by increased productivity. Any surprises there, Steve, or, what do you think about that?
Well, my gut reaction is, of course, yes, sustainable, yes, productive. But I think cost in a world where inflation is set to take off, particularly around ag inputs, and just look at androgynous and what it's doing. I think cost is going to be the way that it accelerates, right? Market-based forces being what they are. If you can reduce and show cost reduction, then the most grizzled 70-year-old grower who doesn't want to change will at least take a look at the technology. And I think that is where people really should stay focused in on, because if you reduce the cost, and this is like any operation we run in manufacturing, well, it has a beneficial effect on lead time. It has better effect on customer satisfaction, better quality, watching all the process, it's safer, et cetera. The same thing is going to happen in ag if you focus in on that area. And I think that is going to be what helps accelerate things. And then you take the supply chain messes that are out there. If you can create more efficient growers, then they can do a lot more with what they already have. Yeah. And that really pertains to the problem of having 10 billion people on Earth and having to feed them. Is, we can't keep taking more land into production. Yeah, we're going to have to do it with what we have today. And so sustainable and cost to me are the big ones. Productivity just is a result of that cost.
Yeah, that's it. That's awesome. I mean, I think aren't we experiencing it right now? I mean, if you look anywhere around the world right now, all the news is around the supply chain, the difficulties that are there in terms of labor, time to market, the costs, and unfortunately cost moves to the consumer as well. So really trying to kind of keep control of that cost. I think I remember a farmer in Ireland saying to me, how can I go green when I'm in the red? So I think, they need to drive that cost equation really well. Any further thoughts on the poll there, Daniel, on your side in terms of what you're seeing there?
I think I'm aligned with Steve. Like in terms of getting there, definitely when you show the market, when you show growers what this can do to their bottom line, it's a big impact, maybe more than the top line, which they have to believe and wait years to see. So on an adoption level, I definitely agree. In terms of how this will change the industry, I think they're not all mutually exclusive. So I think I think I agree. Like this is going to help us conserve water, use less chemicals, and at the same time improve productivity. They're a bit generic there, but I think they're very similar, and I believe in them all. Yeah, good, great stuff. Just moving to the Q&A, you can kind of click the Q&A buttons there, and you can see the questions coming up there. Sean, his question: Prospera's digital solution is clearly additive to traditional pivot irrigation. Are there any gaps, capabilities Valmont is looking to add to its tech stack next? I guess that's headed in Steve's direction.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what we've had to do is to really say that how do we create the best and the least expensive data acquisition tool? There are a lot of technologies that can give you data today. They're expensive. And again, going back into, if you're going to get into scale, you're going to have to get into some market-based kinds of price that people are willing to take the opportunity. And so I think from the side that the machine is on, it's going to be, how can we do it? How can we do it the least expensive way? And how can we capture data at a volume that far exceeds any other technology in the space today? And I think Daniel and his team are working on those things. And so he could probably expound on some of those areas, but that's where the biggest gap, from the ag side of the business is. I think communications is the other. Rural broadband, which is a part of our other businesses, is a big piece there. We're also bringing ag solar to the market, and so we can power things even when there's not reliable power there otherwise. A genset can work in some areas, but in other areas it's going to get stolen. Diesel is expensive. There is no transmission lines, and so therefore I think that's where the rest of our business can really come to help with the technology adoption, because we'll get power, we'll get communications and connectivity out to these very remote areas.
Excellent. Danny's question for Daniel. So much ag tech innovation comes from Israel. What is the secret sauce that's driving this?
It comes up every conference, more or less. I don't think I'm a representative of all of Israel to answer that. I think I can say I can share my personal experience, and it's probably not unique in Israel. I come from like different intelligent units from the age of 18. So that is like, from my perspective, that was like the first startup there, when you sort of you learn so much about how to build a team and how to look very far and believe in things that sound initially very crazy. So I think that is probably a big piece of why Israelis at the age of 18 going into these different units and doing things. I think that's a big piece. And then just I think a lot of technologies that come from the military, look at things like the Iron Dome. That was a great example of how technology was built because it had to be built. And actually now I think the next phase of Israel, so instead of just giving a generic why it's happened, I'll also talk about how I see this going forward. And I don't know, but there's so much talent now being built in the next phase of companies. It used to be very rare to have an extremely big company built all the way. Most companies would go through M&A very early on. And I think now there's so much talent that knows how to build bigger companies and scale companies that I think the next phase of the companies that already is happening now is just going to be even bigger. So I think it's just at the start in the know-how that you used to only be able to get at like Silicon Valley, how to build mega companies. I think that's happening now in Israel. So I expect to see really big companies coming out in the future as well.
Excellent. And I know we're kind of getting tight for time here. There's another question here around, well, for both of you, what advice would you give the next generation of ag tech founders out there building for the future, and what should they know about building a scalable company in this industry? I think you addressed some of that already, Daniel. Any other points you'd point out there, maybe Steve?
Well, I think that the process itself, what you want to become, Daniel talked about it from a founder's perspective, and from the other side of it, I think he was willing to be open to different possibilities. And we started with just a standard rev share agreement, right? It wasn't a joint venture, it wasn't an acquisition, it wasn't a, hey, we're going to go help you do everything that you're doing. It was as this piece of work, almost like a consultancy piece, but we're going to pay you through. If we make money, you make money.
Yeah.
And fortunately, he was well capitalized. Fortunately, he had the organization in place. And I think once we got into the process, we finished in under 2 months, and that's because he was set up to be acquired. So if you're a founder and you're thinking, I only have one way out, then all your plans are going to be for only that one way out. And if it goes a different way, it could be slow, or it won't happen. There's other startup companies we've worked with that can't get basics in line for us to really evaluate whether we want to move forward. So I think that him being a part of Bessemer obviously was a huge help. And, he liked to, when I played devil's advocate in terms of the way that he could grow. I think that was that yin and yang, and let's try these, 3 different ways on before we settle on something. And we didn't have to be impatient because we were working together. I think getting started to work together with someone has does wonders for the whole process.
Yeah, yeah. Crawl, walk, run sounds like is the way to engage and build a relationship, build a trust, and engage. Any final thoughts there, Daniel, on your side? You give some great advice earlier as well, of course.
Yeah, no, I think maybe sometimes it's good to hear things that are, generic and be repetitive about them. So I think just, you have to have grit, especially in this field. Like you're all in. For me, the world was just dots. We'd be anywhere, any point, anytime. We'd get on a flight within 2 hours to meet someone, to make a sale. We work day and nights to make technology work. So I think you have to have that. You have to be all in. And I know it's trivial, but it's a reminder for the hard times for those founders now that are like in their ups or downs, not to stop and just like be all in on what they do. Yeah, excellent. Well, I want to thank you both, Steve and Daniel. Really appreciated your time here today. Congratulations on a really phenomenal partnership. Can't wait to see what the next number of years is going. I'm not going to say another 75 years, but the next 5 to 10 years, I'll be around looking to see what's going on. So really incredible. Thank you for both the great advice you're giving founders and the industry, and again, congratulations on leading the world in artificial intelligence in agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and always a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve, Daniel. And maybe Jess, maybe the next slide, we just wanted to share with you our LATAM challenge is coming up in December 2nd. Please join us for that. And again, thank you for joining us today. I want to thank our team, Jess, Helen, and the team for pulling all this together, and look forward to seeing you next month, obviously on November 17th for our Israeli Spotlight. Thank you, folks. Be safe and look forward to catching up next month.